It's the start of 2025 when you're watching this, but I'm writing and recording this on the former side of the new year. This is the first time in a while since I've gone a full year with barely a mention of the anime I've been watching seasonally, but just because I haven't been talking about what I've been watching seasonally, don't for a moment think that nothing came out this year. Despite not achieving as high a profile as the previous years I've covered in these awards, 2024 still easily had more than enough for me to chew on, and for that matter, an abundance of titles that made choosing these awards even harder. But since most people ignore these videos, let me restate the ground rules. Obviously, I will only be talking about shows that I've watched, hence the absence of Mashal from the Best OP category. As for the shows I did watch, I want to showcase as much as possible, given a lot of shows flew under the radar this year, so I'm putting a 1 award per show limit to prevent any of the big ones from pulling a Shogun. Finally, only aspects that were original to 2024. But now that the formalities are out of the way, let's start this off with another formality. Up first is my equivalent of a participation trophy, the best show I didn't watch category. To me, there seems like no better show to give it to than Suicide Squad Isekai. This is a series that sees a beloved studio have a crack at characters belonging to one of the biggest names in Western comics, and from what I've heard, the impact is a resounding it's okay, innit? The show has been given the honour of the best thing with Suicide Squad branding that came out in 2024, but then again, the competition was a game that was terrible on launch, and somehow the post-launch content additions made it even worse. That's kind of why I don't want to write off this anime, since Wit have a much cleaner track record than modern Arkhamverse games, so it's very possible this show is one I could regret missing out on. The premise is kinda cool, plus, I know there's something in this series that I was really looking forward to, so I might actually check out this show in order to— wait, they've uploaded the ED to YouTube. Okay, now I don't have to watch the whole series. I was worried that one of these days I would have to rename the Best Animation Award to Best Fight Animation, since this prize has gone to an action series all but one time in the 6 years I've been running these awards. However, I can put those fears to rest for at least another year, since the Best Animation Award is going to a show that is almost the polar opposite of action. Instead of needing hyper-choreographed fights to serve as the eye candy, the Shoshimin series operates at full capacity in every scene. If you've seen the show, or read the title for that matter, you might wonder if such a mundane setting can really be that beautiful to look at. But Shoshimin series doesn't flex its animation with what's going on, but how it's going on. That's a really complicated way of putting things. Every camera angle and setting change within a single line of dialogue is another way for the staff at Studio Lapin Track to flex. It even has its ED featuring the characters superimposed into the real locations that they've animated, and there were shots where I couldn't actually tell if it was real life or animated. That's how hard they were flexing. This show was always destined to be a sleeper hit in its appeal, so it needed a hook to draw non-Hyorka fans in. Luckily, it was the animation in this show that really did it for me, but probably not as much as it did for the Gifu Tourism Board. The first anime to catch my eyes this year was Studio Bones' 25th anniversary project, Metallic Rouge, and parts of it were eerily similar to their 20th anniversary project, Carol and Tuesday. This might be the story of two girls who meet on Mars, and it might also have stakes that are very loosely defined because the world building is both somehow layered on too thick while at the same time not explaining anything. But to me, Metallic Rouge is a clear improvement over Carol and Tuesday. For starters, it actually tries to do stuff with its sci-fi setting, since it's a big old story about alien robots decking the shit out of each other. Another reason I have a soft spot for this series is because despite sharing the flaws of Carol and Tuesday, it also shares the strengths of that series too, but dialed up much further. Namely, a really great dynamic between the two leads, and more importantly for this next category, a soundtrack that absolutely blew me away. It's fitting that this song is called Crimson Lightning, because this was the bolt from the blue that really hooked me in at the end of the first episode. A sentiment that was probably shared by the composers as well, since this leitmotif is reused across the soundtrack in ways that still get the hype flowing. But this isn't the only string to the bow, so to speak, as there are other times where the soundtrack surprised me with what it did with itself during low-octane moments. This soundtrack hasn't quite gained the universal acclaim it deserves, since Metallic Rouge wasn't really watched by many people, which is understandable. It's no mystery that people weren't flocking to it since it was sharing a season with I like it when Trigger do something unexpected, but I wasn't expecting them to do a manga adaptation, especially one with such a simple premise. But Dungeon Meshi is not simple by any means. Sure, it might start out with basic scenarios that do the thing in the title, but it would be remiss of a series about dungeon cooking to let its premise go stale. The situations aren't just vehicles for gags, but also chances to showcase a wider world that's being built up without us even realizing it. This is a show I wasn't expecting Trigger to make, but I'm very glad they made it, especially because of the action. Action isn't exactly a logical fit for a cooking show, but I'm just saying it would really spice up the Great British Bake Off if the contestants had to go at a 10-foot pastry monster with a sword before they're allowed to preheat their ovens. I could go on about Dungeon Meshi, and indeed I had planned to as part of the Anime of the Year award, but Dungeon Meshi was pipped at the post by another fantastic show. So I'm going to focus my praise for this series on the respective cooks in this kitchen, with Senshi, Chilchuck, Marcel, and most importantly, the winner of this year's Best Protagonist award, Laios. Even though his party lost a mage, he's still able to work his magic, since he serves as both a good audience surrogate with his curiosity over Senshi's cooking methods, and a great character in his own right, especially with the interactions he has with the characters around him. He came here to do two things: save his sister and geek out about the dungeon, and he is more than comfortable with multitasking. Much like the series itself, he's expressive, layers, and really comes into his own in the second half. Laios is the core that brings the cast, and for that matter, the whole series together. Delicious in Dungeon is rare as far as Trigger projects go, as it's left itself open for a sequel. I'd say Dungeon Meshi 2 is the sequel I want to see Trigger release in 2025, but they just announced new Panty and Stockings release date. I'm not looking that gift horse in the mouth. VTuber Legend is an anime that felt like it didn't do enough with its premise. An anime squarely focused on VTubers is a prime vehicle for gags, especially when it's about what happens on the other side of the curtain. Problem is, VTuber Legend never played around with this dynamic, and instead it's just, hey, wouldn't it be funny if a VTuber did this on stream? And it doesn't quite have the same impact when the VTuber in question isn't real. The same is largely true for the characters in the show, since they don't explore the relationship between the talents outside of a few episodes. One of these episodes is the last one, as well as the recipient of this year's Best Episode of an Underwhelming Show award. Episode 12 is one that's focused around how VTubing as a whole has changed, both within the confines of the show and in real life. It may have been done to celebrate real-life VTubers, but the writers don't use this as an excuse to forego bringing out an interesting side to the characters they've written. The ending montage is when it lays the winning hand, though, since it shows that the staff put this anime together to express their admiration for VTubing. My only complaint is that we don't get to hear Asagiri's song. I really wanted to hear a popular online figure's semi-autobiographical song about how their avatar is a proverbial mask she wears to deal with what she dealt with in school. Oh no. Now for our least anticipated award of the show, it's the Best Series No One Watched award, and by golly it was packed this year. I felt there was no other option than to give it to a show which didn't do much new, but my goodness, I had fun with it. I'd struggle to say that no one watched Sandland, given that it was marketed alongside a movie and a video game, but Disney Plus has long since become the new Netflix jail, so hype around Sandland was muted. That's a real shame because this show was a blast. It's got characters anyone could love, a CG style where Toriyama's character design is taken to experimental places without ever sacrificing its charm, and, of course, it doesn't forget the sense of adventure that such an odyssey would feel incomplete without. While it's all bittersweet after the death of Akira Toriyama, it's the bizarre side projects that remind us how his legacy goes beyond just Dragon Ball, and Toriyama has left behind many other works that have inspired millions. Rest in peace. An OP often does well in my books if the animation is something unlike anything else you see in the show, and the music can get you hyped every time. But I want you to ignore what I just said, because this year the award goes to Spice and Wolf's first opening. While this lacks in hype factor, it makes up for in atmosphere. The slow music and the initial blurry animation really ground you in the scenario, with this being an old tale about an even more ancient god. This opening isn't something that takes a different approach to representing the show, it just simply embodies all of its strengths. Even when it uses clips from the show, you still feel like you're getting new insight on the scale of the world put through the prism of Hollow and Lawrence's relationship, and indeed, that is where the show itself shines. It's rare that an opening can be both relaxing yet still get you anticipating what you're about to see. even if what you're about to see is being narrated to a child that may or may not have been created through horrifying wolf sex. Moving swiftly onwards, a bizarre what-if that always gives me pause for thought is, what if the Hare Hare Yukai came out today? Sure, it was massive when Haruhi came out in 2006 and was spread around by early YouTube, but with TikTok, anime dances can explode in popularity no matter what the actual show it's from is about. This isn't a foolproof strategy, no, since barely anyone was talking about the one they put in the ED of Sentai Daishikaku, and I'm going to give it the recognition it deserves. This ED is focused on the best aspect of the show: the grunts. Their design, coupled with the general vibe of "we don't like our job, but we can't be fecked to find another one," is translated perfectly into their physicality. But things are taken one step further by how out of sync Grunt D is. The animators really leaned into the sense that he is in way over his head, but he's blown every opportunity to turn back. This ED is fully 3D, so while it feels different to the visuals of the show, the unmistakable physicality of the grunts makes it feel right at home with the characters of Sentai Daishikaku. But even with the slightly sillier scenario of the sequence, symbolism still subtly slithers into some scenes to show that you shouldn't subtract substance from style to sell the story. That's a convoluted way of saying this ED gets an S rank. Last year's Best Sequel award is one that was quite a toss-up on paper, since there were sequels to 2 previous Anime of the Year winners airing. But note the use of the word "on paper," since one of them was Vinland Saga Season 2, and the other was Mushoku Tensei Season 2 Part 1. I didn't hate the first arc of Mushoku Tensei's sequel, but we all know it didn't hold a candle compared to the first season. While most stories introducing more personal stakes is typically a good sign, it also helps if you can say what those stakes are without laughing. But if a series never goes through the doldrums, then it would not feel all the sweeter when I say these 3 words: we're so back. Mushoku Tensei Season 2 Part 2 is probably the perfect synthesis of the adventure of the first season with the personal stakes of Season 2 Part 1. But even before Rudeus starts his journey again, there's effort to characterize him and the wider cast. Then, once he does go on his journey, we get more of the world, and he's faced with harder decisions than he's ever been faced with after earth-shattering events. And while you may not agree with all the answers he came to, the motivations and consequences of these actions aren't just glossed over and are instead interrogated. Mushoku Tensei would collapse without Rudeus' character as its beating heart, and I'm so glad to see that after Season 2 Part 1, Rudeus has gone back to going hard. My goodness, I love a good double entendre. Many have commented on the lack of hype for anime this year, but it's in years that are relatively barren that would allow shows that would otherwise be ignored to become popular. If we're talking pure hype, then one series should leap out at you from this year, as it was one name on everyone's lips, a full season before it even started airing. The only problem was that the name was really long. I just want you to lean your head to the side right now. You should hear a slight sloshing noise. That's the sound of your brain dripping out of your ears. There is a temptation with brain rot of this order to plaster some fourth wall breaking in there and call it a day, but Shikanoko Noko Noko Koshtantan proves that there is no replacement for sheer commitment to the bit, and no one commits like Wit. I'm not even sure there's a language that has words to describe what I'm seeing, and yet Wit put 200% into bringing it to life. Ironically, for a gag manga, they didn't treat this show as a joke. The fact that the technical aspects of this show have been taken so seriously is almost another layer to the show's humor, because now even the animators have mysteriously fallen in love with Shikanoko. And just like Koshi, all we can do is look on in bewilderment. But that doesn't stop us from loving it. Orb on the Movement of the Earth is the second high-profile show that came out in the medieval Poland genre this year. This is one that went the literally less economical route, since it likes to kick it with the OGs, namely Astrol OG and Theol OG. No, you can't have them without the most important one, philosophy. This drama is an interesting one to watch because it asks a question that anyone can come up with an interesting answer to. What's up there and why? That being said though, I'm using the word up here for legal reasons, since implying anything else has some rather weighty consequences, and this show can put you on the edge of your seat with just how visceral it gets. I'd call it nail-biting stuff, but most nails have already been removed. Don't go assuming that the Inquisition forcing people to play hungry heretics is the most enduring image of this show, because the place where Orb literally shines is in the very skies the characters are desperately searching. You can really understand why it fascinates them so much when it looks this beautiful. Though it's not just what they see literally, but also figuratively, that allows allows the animators to really flex some of the manga's imagery. This show is one of a few that's contributed to a small boom in historical anime this year, just like the winner of the next award. Best Action was practically locked in when I started writing this video. However, the previously alluded to change that dethroned Dungeon Meshi is affecting this award, so now I've got to find something different to talk about. Thankfully, we have a new heir to the throne. The Elusive Samurai lived up to its name by eluding public knowledge for its runtime, due to the fact it was hiding in the shadow of Shikanoko no Koshtantan. But this was a series that was not to be missed. The Elusive Samurai has something in common with Prince Tokiyuki, and that is the ability to strike a fine balance. This show is really funny when it wants to be, but knows that it also must be serious as well, and so never lets one tone cloud the other. For me, it felt a lot like The Lion King, with a betrayed prince getting into hilarious hijinks but still treating the grander themes with the gravity they deserve, and never letting the characterization get thrown out the window for the sake of a gag. The Elusive Samurai goes one step further with this though, because it also has a mature rating and a historical setting to add to the seriousness. This is a record of warring clans battling for supremacy all over Japan, so action is always available on any given front. But it would all fall apart if there was not the sense of boyish excitement one feels from watching the young prince seamlessly dart in and out of danger. Be it swords, slings, or slides into the supernatural, the Elusive Samurai is always easy on the eyes. The only improvement I can really suggest is that the horse CG could have used a bit longer in the oven. Though, if all you need is horses in ovens, Tesco's would be more than happy to help you on that front. I only saw one movie this year, and it was Look Back, though the odds would have been stacked in its favour even if I had watched other films this year. Look Back is one of the only times I've read the manga going into an anime, so I was well aware how easily this was going to absolutely destroy me. But even then, Look Back dropped a deadly emotional payload, and is why it easily clinches Best Movie. Look Back is only 50 minutes long, but with a story that feels as methodical as any longer film, yet just as fast as one episode of a regular TV series. It's a deeply personal story about friendship, art, connection, and talent, where everything hits just that bit deeper thanks to the animation. This is Durian handling the adaptation of Fujimoto's manga instead of Mappa, but like 2022's Chainsaw Man, they've translated the art frame for frame onto screen, and with every bit of animation between those frames feeling purposeful. The sound design also deserves a shout out, because music is used sparingly, so you could better appreciate how meticulous every sound's placement is, as well as how gripping and extended silence can be. No, if there was more music in this film, I'd imagine it would be this.
Welcome to my mine. We are mining time.
You know, I might be going to hell for that one. I'm not sure yet. Our penultimate award is the coveted Best Series Award. The anime of 2024 is one that I'm sure you'll all be anticipating the reveal of, as it's one that beat out Dungeon Meshi, even though I was almost certain that nothing else this year could. It was a show with a special something. An X factor that allowed it to rise above the rest. And that anime is... dun dun dun... Wait, that's not how you pronounce it. Dandadan was practically destined to turn heads with just 5 words, those 5 words being Creepy Nuts did the opening. But once those heads were turned, they couldn't look away, because how could you take your eyes off something so legendary? This is the culmination of Science Saru's recent outputs, showing that even without Yuasa as director, the animators can go just as wild, if not even wilder. Ken and Ayase's battles against the most normal residents of Saitama are always a treat, but the creative direction isn't just reserved for the fights. The downtime doesn't give you any downtime, since the excitement and directorial finesse are bursting out of every conceivable pore. All of that meant Dandadan was easily going to find its way into the Best Action Award this year, but I thought nothing more. Then episode 7 happened. Many of my favourite anime have managed to surprise me, but surprise doesn't quite describe what episode 7 did to me. Episode 7 felt closer to a jump scare than a surprise, with this series hitting an emotional tone much rawer than anything I expected. The fact this was able to fit in a series that's also as fast-paced and off its rocker as this reminds me of Turbo Baba, because that took balls. But the weird and raunchy shenanigans that make up the show would be wasted on boring characters. characters. But thankfully, everyone has their time to shine. With characterization this solid, it would take a real dummy to fail to be compelling. Though, mind you, even the real dummy was compelling. Dan announced its sequel the day before it aired its final episode, so the wait for more will be brief. But I fear that this brief time won't have anything that comes close to Dan in it. No, I suppose it's not too bad that the wait is brief with nothing in it. After all, Ken's briefs have nothing in them either. For our final award, I've got to tell you something. Every season, I want to watch something that I feel is a blind spot for me. And one oversight I have is shoujo anime. I barely watch much for reasons that are fairly apparent, but then I heard that Yubisaki Torenren was supposedly one of the best shows of the season, and I thought, what the heck. I might as well leave my comfort zone and watch a romance anime where I'm not the target demographic. It won't be wall-to-wall cute girls, but instead hunky boys as the focus. So after watching Yubisaki Torenren and seeing our protagonist have to choose between several hunky boys yearning for her affection for 12 episodes, my main takeaway was that the main girl is really cute. Mission failed successfully. Yuki is adorable. Just because they skimped on having to animate a lot of the sign language, that doesn't mean they gave up on communicating her character to the audience. And that character is one we will always root for. She's just pure. You want to see her be happy. This show got me to sit through a whole 3 episodes worth of umming and ahhing over passport renewal because it was a girl this cute doing it. I mean, if all shoujo anime are like this, maybe I've been missing out on something. Let me repeat that. Someone else renewing their passport is engaging because of her. Just restating that for those who didn't hear me the first time. Okay, I'm definitely going to hell for that one.